This is going to get uncomfortable. But prepare to be uncomfortable so that you can be comfortable later on. The first big area is people pressures, and the second big area is personal pressures. There's a lot of unspoken pressures in the corporate landscapes, in the business landscapes. Wouldn't you agree that the less we speak about something, the more it exerts its influence in our life? And the less we speak about something, the greater those pressures have influences in all areas of our life outside of our career. So in this video, I want to talk about, well, what are these pressures? Because chances are if you've been feeling them but haven't talked about it because it's taboo, then there's not a whole lot of clarity inside, and being able to articulate the pressures is important to be able to overcome the pressures. I'm going to be speaking your pressures, articulating them, and giving a framework on how do we move from pressure to momentum. Now, first of all, before we begin, it would be important to define what pressure is. And sometimes we can give labels to things as pressures when they aren't really pressures. Pressure is the physical and mental tension that you experience while in the process of achievement, when the stakes of success matter deeply to you. Now, this is really important because they're both physical and psychological. Or how many of you agree that when you feel an intense amount of pressure, when something's really important to you on that path to achievement, like you feel it physically, your heart starts racing, your palms start sweating, you are asphyxiating, you feel a lot of muscle tension, your shoulders are shrugged, maybe you have headaches and migraines, maybe there's acid indigestion and a lot of pressure in our digestion systems. So there's physical aspect of it, and there's also the psychological aspect of it as well. And that's why there's a lot of talk about mental health and mental considerations and emotional health. That's why there's such an emerging conversations about that. So pressure is both the physical and mental tensions that you feel. Now, it's on the process of achievement. When you want to achieve something and the achievement of that thing matters deeply to you, then we feel the pressures. If it doesn't matter to you at all, there's no pressure. Like for example, I'll give you a personal example. I have a YouTube channel, and you know of my YouTube channel because you're right here. Now, I have my YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel is an educational channel. It is focused on leadership, professional development. My channel is not a fashion and beauty channel. As a result of that, the achievement of my own beauty, the achievement of my own fashion is not as important to me. So when I go out there and I'm networking with women, when I'm going out there and I see a lot of women dressed and they're well put together, when I see other beauty influencers and they know how to do their hair and makeup, I don't feel that social pressure. I don't feel that pressure on how do I need to do my makeup and hair, right? So if something doesn't matter too deeply, there's not a pressure. However, when something matters to you, so the things that matter to me is leadership, being able to help you and coach you on your leadership and your personal development and your personal growth as well. These things matter to me. So the pressure that I have is the physical and mental pressures that I have to be able to create great content that transforms your life and makes a difference for you, right? Makes sense? So it's physical and mental. Now, when it comes to the potential of feeling pressure, this pressure, the physical and physiological pressure, it manifests as both a motivating force and a potential source of stress. So here's what I mean by that. You have something you want to achieve. The stakes of that success matter deeply to you. It's a motivating force. In other words, you have a great deal of urgency to achieve it. You may have your own deadlines. Someone else may have imposed a deadline on you, but it's a motivating force. And however, if that motivating force continues and the pressure builds, it now becomes a potential source of stress. So let's look at when it comes to having these pressures. Wouldn't you agree that there are varying degrees of pressure? So pressure can grow from low to high. Pressure can also grow in reverse, from high to low. But with increasing pressure in our life, it affects us. It affects the way that we live our lives. It affects how we show up in front of others. And it affects how we influence other people as well. So here's what it looks like. When we experience an increasing amount of pressure in the way that I defined it earlier, in a low pressure environment, when we are psychologically and physiologically low pressure in a low pressure environment, internal or external low pressure, we really can live our life very present. Like we are present. We are in a now where we have confidence and clarity. So this is the way what it means to be present. We live an authentic life. It's transformational. We have self-regulation, internal governance where, I still experience emotions, but I'm able to regulate. I'm able to manage those. They don't overwhelm me. They don't define me, and they don't affect the way that I communicate, or they don't cause me to be impulsive, right? So there's self-regulation when we're present. Now, with a little bit of increasing pressure, we could move from being present to being on alert. So on alert, the way we live our lives, if we're on alert, it means that, well, most likely you can be productive when you're on alert. Most likely you can also have a successful life and feel that you're being productive and efficient and effective when you're on alert. But the nature of being on alert, living your life that way, means there's a constant risk of being in a preloaded state, right? And it depends on the environment and situation. So then there may be some environmental triggers or some events in the situation that easily pushes us to the next stage of being preloaded. So what does preloaded mean? Preloaded is now we're not quite at fight or flight, but there's more pressures, right? As here in the timeline of increased pressure, there's more pressure and we're preloaded. So there's a risk of becoming in fight or flight. There's a struggle to make progress or failure to make progress at the preloaded stage. We're constantly suspicious of things going on around us. We're constantly making assumptions due to that suspicion. And we feel oftentimes that we need to be hypervigilant, looking out for ways that we might need to protect ourselves. So there's a hypervigilance, high alert, suspiciousness, and agitation as a result of being in that situation environment. And when this happens in the preloaded state, you are physically and cognitively in decline. Decline meaning, have you ever noticed that in situations where we're preloaded and we're really highly suspicious and agitated, it's really difficult to come up with innovative ideas. It's really difficult to be able to listen and participate in very complex discussions and contribute in really deep, meaningful ways. It's also really difficult to be able to be in conversations that are impromptu without having that time to prepare in advance. So that's what it means by preloaded. There's a cognitive decline and a physical decline because there's a demand on your body to being in such a high alert phase. So now watch this. From the preloaded stage, when pressure increases in our lives, this is where we can go into fight or flight. And when you're in fight or flight, it is a state of attacking the present moment or fleeing from the present situation. And either way, attacking or fleeing is not really addressing the root causes. We can't really be present here to respond and build meaningful relationships. We can't really be present to really give our most innovative solutions. So this is where you kind of feel like, well, not going anywhere. I'm running the cycles. I'm in this rat race and not going anywhere. So this is fight or flight. And at this stage, fight or flight, it's like physical and cognitive in rapid decline. It becomes increasingly more difficult to show up in a business and to be strategic, or to be able to communicate with stakeholders or higher ups in ways that are contributing to our fullest potential. And watch this, in fight or flight, if the pressure is unchecked and the pressure increases having been unchecked, now it's easy to go into full overwhelm. With just a little bit of an emotional pressure or situational pressure, we can go into full overwhelm. And the way we live our lives when we're in full overwhelm is there's a significant struggle. And the struggle may not just be in your career path. It could now take place, the struggle in our families. It could translate to our social lives. It could translate to our financial lives. The struggle could be in our physical fitness, our wellness as well. So it's like significant struggles and a lack of congruency in those other areas of our life, just outside of career. And in this case, it's like systems overload. Now, a lot of people use the word overwhelmed incorrectly. Right? We talk about overwhelmed when our email inbox is full, right? But the definition of overwhelm is an inability to cope. Inability to cope. So I noticed that a lot of times that people use the word overwhelm quite easily and they reach for it when it's not really a systems overload and inability to cope. But if it really is, it's like systems are breaking down. And this is where you're in progressive and immediately rapid decline. And this is where you're noticing that there's a susceptibility to disease. There's a susceptibility to disorders, for example, migraines, headaches, indigestions, the things that we talked about earlier, those physical symptoms. So this is how we live our life. How you live when there is increasing pressure. Now, look at how, correspondingly, how you appear to others. And think of this as levels of leadership in how you live your life. You can be present, how you appear to others can be present, in which case you're a natural magnetic leader. You're persuasive, you're influential, you are effective in your leadership positions, and you are seen as someone with genuine intention, like you know what you want, and you're very intentional. And you can appear that way, how you appear to others, if the pressures are low and you're present. Now, the next phase of being on alert, how do you appear to others? Well, you might appear to others as effective and still persuasive and still productive, but there's a little bit of forcefulness that you appear to them, right? There's a little bit of aggression sometimes that you're coercing, you're trying to change people's minds. They appear, you have that experience of some forcefulness here and there, depending on the situation, right? And so there's in control on the outside, how you look to other people, but you might appear to be in control on the outside. But occasionally, when they experience you as a leader, here and then, depending on the situation, you're occasionally distracted, like kind of hurried, maybe even short with your team members. Have you ever experienced that? Right. So this is like the preloaded state already. Not even at fight or flight. Leaders can appear that way. Passive aggressive. They're frantic. They are quite forceful at giving their direction at maybe this way or the highway. It could be reactive, and yet they could be very irritable when there's slight deviations from the targets or there's slight deviations from metrics. They could be a little bit irritable and exhibiting poor judgment as well. Judgment of the metrics, but also judgment of their team members. It could be poor judgment of how team members are performing, or poor judgment of whether or not your team members truly are inspired by what they're doing or engaged with your leadership efforts. And finally, it's provocative. Right? Have you ever worked with that? Some higher ups, or maybe your direct manager in your previous or your current company, where they really exhibited as provocative. Right. That's when they become in the preloaded state. Now watch this. From preloaded, you go to fight or flight. And in fight or flight, look at how you appear to others. There's like physically threatening. It's intimidating. Sometimes they're even dangerous. Like they're a threat to the team. It could be a threat to your productivity. Sometimes they could be a threat to the growth you want to see in your own career, or a threat to your own visions of what you want to achieve for your personal self. It's driven by circumstances outside of the present. There's a lot of fight or flight that happens internally. A lack of self-regulation, a lack of self-governance, and a perception that's not really true in the present. And this is where these are circumstances all outside of what really is there. And that's why a lot of times fight or flight leaders in fight or flight, they're really disconnected with their team members and absent. Now, I'm talking predominantly about the workplace, but these stages of how you live and how you appear to others can happen at home too. Now, in full overwhelm, how you appear to others is like at immediate risk. They see you as a flight risk. They see you as a risk to their projects, a risk to the budget they have and how it's being allocated, a risk to how they want to run their teams, especially if they're ambitious team members. There's a flight risk there, and a threat to yourself and those around you. And how you appear to others is immediately needing, you need to stop or you need to slow down. You're moving too fast. You're looking at everything all at once. And this is the conversation I have with a lot of leaders who are in full overwhelm. A lot of my clients come to work with me because they feel like, and they know they're in full overwhelm. And they know that when they lead their teams, there's this belief in their minds that we need to do everything all at once, right now, and right away. When that's just simply not true. Whether or not you're a CEO or you own your own business function, it's just simply not true that you have to do everything all at once and right now and right away. And when leaders are in full overwhelm, they impose that upon their team members. And that's why it's like how you appear to others is, oh, you need to slow down or stop or slow down right now before you become even more of a great risk and become a liability here. So this is how you appear to others. Now, watch the last part. How you appear to others, now it goes on to how you affect other people. Make no mistake about it, when you're working in a company, whether or not you have direct reports, let's say you don't have direct reports, but you're on a team, that's still how you affect the other people on your team. You have team members. Every one of your team members has their own personal goals. They join the company for a reason. They have their own personal and professional goals as well. So how you affect others is relevant regardless of whether or not you are a leader of teams or a people manager. Now, if you're present, how you affect others, you can be a very calming and uplifting source for them. You can be in a place where you exude a lot of transparency. And transparency is important on a team because transparency creates accountability. And you have transparency and you can increase momentum on your team, make your team members, help them to feel heard and understood, and help them to see you as a source of wisdom and a source of inspiration. And finally, when you are present, you can help them to be a source of lowering pressure around them. You lower pressure around you, and that's how you can affect other people. On the on alert phase, how you affect other people, well, you might be stimulating them to think differently, stimulating them to operate at the next level, however you define it, or you might be able to maintain transparency levels and momentum to some degrees. But remember, when you're on alert, there's a little bit of forcefulness there already, and there's a risk of escalating to being preloaded. So even though you are able to maintain that transparency and momentum on the alert stage, there's like some circumstances with the forcefulness and with the risk of being preloaded where there's a question and a skepticism around whether or not that transparency and momentum can be sustainably maintained, if you know what I mean. Right. So then with on alert, leaders who are on alert, they occasionally lower the pressure and noise around them, but not always, because they're struggling with the threat inside of them to escalate into fight or flight and escalate into preloaded. Now, by the time a leader gets to preloaded, the way they affect other people is that they can come across and affect them by being very imposing their beliefs, imposing their values, imposing the way they see things and the way they see them. And there's decreasing transparency momentum on the preloaded stage because of the lack of self-governance and the self-regulation. There's a decrease in transparency because there's a lot of shame around, well, I don't want to tell my team members what's really going on because I need to appear put together. I need to appear like a leader. So then by the time leaders get to preloaded, they don't talk about it and it becomes taboo, just like the title of this video. Yeah, the pressures that everybody's experiencing, but nobody talks about it. And so therefore, with preloaded state, the way you affect others is increasing pressure, and they feel the pressure. Now let's talk about fight or flight. The way you affect other people in fight or flight is now when you're intimidating and dangerous how you appear to them, how you affect them is that they're frightened. Absolutely frightened. Now, by the time leaders are in full overwhelm here, it's viscerally threatening. And you ever heard the phrase that people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses, right? They quit in cultures and environments. To many degrees, that's true. Because by the time, the leadership, it becomes full overwhelm. It's viscerally threatening. I just can't be here. I just can't take it anymore. And it prohibits transparency and momentum, and it increases pressure and noise to the degree that your team members themselves can also come into full overwhelm. So with that, if this is how you live your life, and this is how you appear to others, and this is how you affect others, wouldn't it stand to reason that we really need to understand what are the pressures? What are they? What are all the pressures that we can experience? And that when we can articulate them in a way that is clear, that I can understand it, you can understand it, the people around you can understand it, only when we can bring that to light, now we can find sustainable solutions to overcome the overwhelm. So let's talk about those pressures, bring that clarity and articulation. This is the way that pressure is calculated. It's a physics principle. P is pressure. Pressure equals force exerted over a surface area. So force over area. So what does this mean? How does this translate to your professional lives? Pressure, as I defined earlier, as the physical and mental tension you experience while you are achieving something that deeply matters to you. That is pressure. It equals force, and the force here refers to life's forces. Life's forces. In other words, like all of your responsibilities is a life force. The expectations that you have for yourself and other people's expectations that they have on you, that's a life force. Deadlines are a force. The ability for people to need your support for whatever reason. They required your support. They required your help and your aid. That is a life's force. So there's many forces. And if a force is concentrated over a small area, so you see here, force over area. If you increase the area, you decrease the pressure. If you decrease the area, you increase the pressure, because pressure and area are inversely proportional. So if you concentrate the life's forces over a small area, so here's what I mean by that. If all of the pressures in your life and the life's forces, if all of the pressures, the tensions you experience are in the area of your career, that's a small area of your life, because let's face it, your career is not your whole life. There are other areas of your life. You have family, you have your social life, you have your health and wellness, that's an area of life. You have your spiritual life, that's another area of life. You have your finances and your wealth, that's another area of your life. And you also have your mental, your intellectual part of life. So there's 7 areas that I just counted. So if your pressures, responsibilities, expectations, when your supports, your deadlines, if that is concentrated on the career area of life, it's a small area relative to your whole life, then the pressure intensifies. Now, here's another way that pressures can be concentrated on a small area. Within the pressures that you experience in your career, if the pressures are concentrated with limited resources, or limited time because the deadlines are so close, or you have limited support systems, the pressure also intensifies because it's now distributed over a small area, because pressure is inversely proportional to area. Now let's talk about force. As you can see, force is above the line. It's force over area. So that means pressure is proportional to force. When you increase the force applied, you increase pressure. Now here's the clue. In Newton's third law of physics, the third law of physics is action-reaction. What does that mean? It means forces come in pairs. Every force comes in pairs. So you have life's forces coming at you. Let's say your responsibilities, expectations, the deadlines, those are forces that are coming to you. You also apply a force back on them. So there's action-reaction. Forces come in pairs. So then if your responsibilities are intense, the expectations, the deadlines are intense, you're going to apply an equal and opposite force on them. And when you increase your force, you increase pressure, because pressure and force are proportional. Conversely, the same forces distributed over a larger area, if you have a larger area, for example, you have better support systems, you have coaches and mentors that support you, you've increased your resourcefulness, and it's not about resources, you've increased your own resourcefulness, or you've also implemented some really effective ways at understanding your time and tracking your time. That results in a more manageable pressure, because pressure is inversely proportional to area. You've distributed the pressure over a larger area just by having better support systems, increasing your resourcefulness and your ability to track your time and manage your time and optimize your time. So then pressure is inversely proportional to area. Now, this is the simple physics equation, force over pressure. Now, there's another equation to pressure as well, which is pressure equals rho GH. Rho is the Greek letter rho, which stands for density, right? So pressure is equals to the density of a fluid times G, which is the gravitational constant, times H, was the height of the fluid. Now, notice how it's rho times gravity times height, which means that pressure is proportional to rho density. It's proportional to the height. Just as fluid pressure increases with depth, because if you increase the depth of the fluid, if you have a very high container, the pressure increases as well. So just as fluid pressure increases with depth, your life's pressure can accumulate when challenges stack up. You stack up the pressure. You have increased challenge. You experience increasing pressure. Density, which is rho, but fluid density is measured by the fluid's mass divided by its volume. But in real life, density represents the complexity of this challenge that you're facing, or the complexity of the situation that you're facing. And the height, H, symbolizes the accumulation of demands on you. So if you have a lot of demands on yourself, a lot of demands either from you, from other people, from your perceptions, the accumulation of that is increasing H. If you have a greater complexity, if the challenges involved are very complex, the situational environment is very complex, then you also increase pressure as well. So then let's talk about what's G. I talked about G in the physics equation is a gravitational constant. 9.8 meters per second squared is a gravitational constant. So how does that apply to real life? Just as G is a constant in physics, G refers to consistent external factors in your professional lives that affect everyone. Consistent external factors such as market forces. I mean, you work in a business, you work for a business. There are market forces all the time that create pressures. For example, market forces like there's industry standards, there's competitive forces, competitive pressures, there's economic conditions that are outside of your control, and these are market factors that are constant. They're external to you, but they're constant, they're consistent. Just as the gravitational constant remains unchanged, regardless of an object's mass, all of these external factors that I shared with you just now remain constant regardless of your position and regardless of your capacity or capability. So from this equation, you can see that how much pressure you experience depends on the density of the challenges and responsibilities in your life and the height of accumulated demands. So with that was a long introduction, I understand, but we needed to create common field. So with that, let's talk about the things that people don't talk about. Let's put words to them. And it's important to put words to things because when you articulate the things that are going on inside of you, you increase transparency and therefore you increase accountability. And when you express yourself clearly, you're more likely to be able to meet your underlying needs. And you're more likely to able to create alignment with team members. So I understand there may be some stigma or there may be some hesitation or maybe even shame around talking about the pressures that you experience. But I encourage you to put words to your experiences because most of the time people don't know what you're going through. And when they don't know what you're going through, the only thing they have to go by is your behaviors or your inactions, your actions or your inactions. And it's easy in a competitive environment like corporations and in an evaluative environment like that, where they look at measures, they measure your performance. It's easy in that type of environment to make assumptions of why you're doing what you do and why you didn't do what you're supposed to do. But they don't know what's going on inside of you. So let me put some words to it so that from this point forward that you can more clearly reflect on which of these pressures are you experiencing and how might you be able to articulate that, continue to articulate that in more clear ways to build meaningful relationships with your colleagues and your higher ups as well and your family members so that they know exactly how to support you. Because it's hard to ask for help if you haven't articulated what's really going on. Okay, so let's move forward. Now, when it comes to pressures, there are two big areas of pressures and there are 10 pressures, right? So picture that. Two big areas, think of them as categories. And under each category of pressure, there are the individual pressures. So the two big areas or categories of pressures are number one, people pressures, which are the pressures involving other people. And in a leadership context, this one is so important, very important, because whether or not you have a position of leadership, maybe you're not a manager yet, maybe you don't have a team, maybe you are a manager, but you don't manage people. It doesn't matter. You're still in a leadership context. As long as there's an org chart and there's a corporate hierarchy and you report to somebody or you're working with other people to achieve a result, that's a leadership context. right? So then 2 big areas. The first big area is people pressures, and the second big area is personal pressures. So I'm going to go through each of those areas, starting with people pressures first, and we're going to get into talking about the things that people don't talk about. This is going to get uncomfortable, but prepare to be uncomfortable so that you can be comfortable later on. So with that, people pressures. The first type of people pressure that is experienced in a business. Now, I'm saying in a business because you work in a business, right? So the first type of pressure is, I'm going to call it positional pull. So what does positional pull mean? There's a dual directional pull. The first directional pull is that you work in a business and there are demands on you to deliver more with fewer resources while trying to manage pushback from your teams claiming under-resources or under-resourcing. So the demands on you could be the demands that you know and you develop within you, because you have your own expectations of what you want to achieve, and you have your own vision of what it means for you to be achieving at your fullest potential. But the fact is, in a business, resources are finite. And the fact is, in life, resources are finite. That's why it's never about how many resources you have. And it's always about how resourceful you are. So the first positional pull is this one, where you need to deliver more and you feel that demand, and there's fewer resources available to you, because the more you want to deliver, the greater the contribution you want to make. You play at a higher strategic level and the resources stay the same. That's why there's fewer resources when you're trying to make a bigger impact. And when that happens in a business, you have higher ups. You don't own the company. It's not like what you say goes. You don't run the company. You can't call all the shots. So there's an aspect of it while you're trying to deliver more that you're going to be managing pushback. You're going to be managing resistance. You're going to be managing questions, from teams or higher ups where they're saying, okay, hold on, we don't have the resources for something like that. So that's one direction of the pull. The other direction of the pull is the responsibility you have for implementing decisions that might damage credibility with team members. So what do I mean by that? Let's unpack this a little bit. Remember, responsibility was one of the life forces. P equals F over A. So F is a life force. Responsibility is one of them. So there are decisions that you're implementing, whether the decisions came from you as a team leader or as the project manager or it came from your higher ups. But now you're the one that needs to implement on the decision that got made. And when you implement on a decision, there's the what, and then there's the how on how to implement on that decision. Wouldn't you agree that in a business, it's sometimes not possible to have 100% consensus? You might see through your expertise and through your knowledge that this is how we're going to implement that decision, and it's our best chance. This is the most strategic way, and I've thought it through. You may be able to see that, but your team members may see things differently. Or they might see that as damaging, or they might see that as that's not the most efficient way. And this is the thing, when it comes to leading people or projects or processes, when it comes to leading, everything that you say is heard through a megaphone, and everything you do is seen through a microscope. They're watching. But it's impossible to have 100% consensus. So on the one hand, you need your team members to support you in implementing those decisions. And in order to have a good relationship with them, or a productive relationship with them, you feel the pull of remember, bidirectional pull. You feel the pull of, well, I need to maintain my credibility with them. I need them to trust my leadership. I need them to respect my decisions and see the merit in them. Right? So sometimes within the responsibility of implementing the decision, there may be the other directional pull that it might damage the credibility, that it might cause team members to say, well, I don't know what they're talking about. Right? I don't think they're making the right decisions, or I don't think they're being effective leaders. Right? So that's the first people pressure, is the positional pull. The other type of people pressure is the performance pressure. Performance pressure. Like, I'm sure when I say that, the mere phrase, performance pressure, immediately you have in your mind a picture of that exact experience. So let me put words to it to help you distill it down, to articulate that in very clear ways. The first type of performance pressure is the pressure that is experienced, which is a physical, remember back to the definition, the physical and psychological tension we experience, which now in the performance pressure, it's more work-related stress and anxiety. So how does this occur? Work-related stress and anxiety. What's the origins? Because I'm not interested in symptoms. I'm interested only in root causes. So when it comes to work-related stress and anxiety, the root cause of that is our ambition to perform optimally in situations where a high level of achievement is demanded. And there's so much threat when you feel like you're not reaching that high level of achievement, or there might be obstacles in the way of achieving that high level of achievement. You already feel like there's a threat to your position, there's a threat to your role, there's a threat to your involvement. You already feel that. So the work-related stress and the anxiety is really at the precipice, the intersection of the ambition to perform optimally in those situations. The ambition comes from you because you set goals, you see a vision of what you want to create, and don't you desire to achieve your life mission, however you've defined it? Don't you desire to make a meaningful contribution, one where you can look back and say, I achieved that, I did that, and I'm proud of it. Like, that's really important. And to look back and say, you know what? My work matters. My career mattered. It mattered to the people. I knew who it mattered to. And it mattered to my industry. So we desire to have that experience. So the ambition comes from that, to perform optimally, to be able to produce those outcomes. So this is the first part of performance pressure. The other part of performance pressure is this tendency to take on multiple roles simultaneously. And it's all while trying to maintain exceptional performance in all. Right? I mean, raise your hand. I might not see you, but while you're sitting there and you're listening to this, just raise your hand if you've done that before. Taken on multiple roles simultaneously, which could also look like your manager encourages you to come to this meeting. Your manager wants you on this new project. And, you say yes to things. And you keep saying yes to things because of the implications of what saying no means is undesirable, because a high level of achievement is demanded. So we take on multiple roles. It could be multiple responsibilities. It could be multiple projects, or it could be multiple team members simultaneously. And then all while trying to be exceptional at performing well, high performance. That ranking they give in your performance review, exceeded expectations. We have that as our goal, our gold standard. The ideal standard is having our boss check that box. He or she exceeded expectations. And this is all for the sake of, I need to prove my deservingness of a promotion, or I need to prove my worthiness of having opportunities given to me. And this is our tendency, speaking to the ambition that is inherently inside. And then we take on multiple roles while trying to exceed expectations on our performance. So this is the second category, pressure, the second individual pressure under performance pressure. Now, the last one, we're still talking about people pressures. The last type of people pressure is what I'm going to call strategic strain. So what does that mean? Strategic strain, number one, it's when there's difficulty influencing across boundaries or across different stakeholders when you don't have direct authority. Right? So what's authority? Authority, I'm simply referring to that org chart. Every company has an org chart. Where do you sit on that org chart? a little bit more blunt way of saying it is, where are you in the pecking order? That's a very blunt way of saying it. I personally don't prefer that way of articulating it. But it's really like, if you read the org chart from the top down, it shows you the reporting structure. Who do you report to? But when you read the org chart from the bottom up, those are communication lines. So if there's an issue, if there's a question, if there are challenges, who do you communicate those to? So the strategic strain is really a day-to-day, month-to-month, a week-to-week difficulty when we're in these communications with stakeholders or higher-ups, where we need to influence, we need to exude influence across the boundaries that are delineated on the org chart. But we need to do that without direct authority. So oftentimes you don't even have positional authority. So you don't even have a title of manager or director, or maybe you don't even have a title of VP, but in your role and responsibility, you are expected to influence without that positional authority. So that's the first element of strategic strain. And the other element, number 2, is operating with limited access to executive level information while you're being expected to make informed decisions. So here's what that means. In a company, for example, I'm giving you a concrete example. In a company, being able to understand the finances of a company is so important because it gives you perspective on what the business needs. And that's truly going to help you to make informed decisions on what projects are we going to take on, which projects are we going to put on hold, where are we going to put our resources, where do we need to increase our expenditures or decrease our expenses. And if I make this decision based within my wheelhouse, if I make this decision, what are the financial implications so that I can make the proper decision when I review my decision or my idea to my higher ups. So then you're expected to make these types of informed decisions that demonstrate that you have fiscal responsibility, but you don't have access to that information. In other words, you may not have access, you may not be privy to the financial statements of the company. That's just one example. So think about all the other executive level information that you may have limited access or no access to, but still you're expected to make informed decisions based on insight and based on data, not based on emotions or assumptions. So those are the individual strategic strains that are very common in the workplace. And these are pressures that people don't talk about, but everyone feels them. So those are the people pressures. Now let's talk about the personal pressures. Oftentimes, clients come into my coaching program because they feel the personal pressures first. And that becomes like the biggest unmet need in terms of, well, how do I manage these personal pressures? What do I do? How do I take that pressure and minimize it? How do I navigate through those pressures? Right? That's the number one reason why my clients come to work with me, is because of these personal pressures. So let's talk about what they are. The first type of personal pressure is what I'm going to call this progression pressure. So progression, the root word of progression is progress. Wouldn't you agree that we all want to make progress in our careers? Like, you want to make progress in your projects, you want to make progress in your growth, you want to make progress in your influence, you want to make progress on your skills. Like, you just want to make progress. And that is what being in momentum is all about, when you know you're making progress. But there are pressures associated with making progress. And that's what the category of progression pressure means. The first type of progression pressure is the continuous pressure to identify and pursue what's next while maintaining current performance levels. I had a client who came into my coaching program, and he goes, Dr. Grace, he likes to call me Dr. Grace. I'm indifferent either way, but he called me Dr. Grace. He goes, Dr. Grace, I've had so much success in my career as an engineering manager and the director of my software department. I've had so much success. But I'm starting to feel, and I've felt like this for a long time, that I've reached a plateau. And I'm not as inspired by what I'm doing compared to what I used to be. I'm not that inspired anymore. And I'd been wondering, well, what's next? Right, what's next? I'm not interested in making more money. It's not about the money. I'm not interested in climbing the corporate ladder because it's not about, I don't care about titles, right? It's not about needing to increase my performance because I've done really well and I've achieved a lot of success. But I just want to know what's next. And he came to me and that was the biggest source of pressure in his life. But he didn't want to sacrifice his current performance levels. So there's this continuous pressure to identify and pursue what's next while maintaining our levels of performance that we've had up until now. The second type of progression pressure is when we're trying to manage the ceiling that we perceive. We're trying to manage that with really real career progression concerns, right? How many have experienced that before? Have you ever thought about, well, I have a ceiling on my income, or I've reached a ceiling and I want to break through the ceiling. For those of you who are Asian like me, right, there's a term out there called a bamboo ceiling. Bamboo ceiling. First it was just a ceiling, now it's become a bamboo ceiling. And then for women like me, there's the term the glass ceiling. Right? So there's this progression pressure to manage the perception of there's a ceiling over me, but I don't like ceilings. I don't like floors or ceilings. I just want to progress. So there's concerns about one's progression, but there's a perception that there's a ceiling there, that I need to break through that ceiling. And that is a huge source of progression pressure. So remember how I mentioned earlier, how I had a client come to me and ask me, really, Dr. Grace, my biggest problem is I just don't know what's next. Well, the second biggest problem, the second biggest pressure where clients come to me is about this. There's a ceiling above my head, and I don't like the ceiling. I've been trying everything to overcome it. I've been going back to get more school. I've been getting certifications. I went to Stanford University, for God's sake. I have tried everything. I worked harder. I got all the check marks on great feedback, and yet there's still this ceiling. What do I do? How do I manage it? How do I address my own career progression concerns? And that's the second biggest reason why my clients came to work with me. So this is progression pressure. And this is the kind of thing where no one talks about it. No one talks about this, and yet everybody feels it, right? Because it's not professional. I don't want to be seen as complaining, and so no one talks about it. But it's important to be able to articulate the pressures you're feeling so that you know exactly how to ask for support. And so that you know exactly where to ask for support with the right people. So this is progression pressure. The next type of personal pressure that people experience is called practical pressure. Now, practical pressure, by the way, these are my terms. I'm calling it practical pressure. What practical pressure means is the day-to-day operational challenges or the tactical execution demands that you experience. And make no mistake about it, there's a day-to-day operations. There's always a day-to-day operations. Even if you're listening to this and you're a director level in your job title, some of you are VPs as well. And if you're a director and a VP, you manage levels of leadership beneath you. And ideally, you're not in the day-to-day operations. You're not in the day-to-day tactical executions, but there's elements of it. So here's where the practical pressure comes into play. The first practical pressure is the temptation to handle team members' work instead of developing their capabilities. And I see this very often. Remember what I mentioned, VPs and directors. If you're C-level, a VP or a director, or you're a senior manager, an established senior manager in your company, you have fiscal responsibilities to that company. And when the company grows, and as the company grows, you need to be able to grow with the company. So can you see how if you're a senior manager, a director, a VP, a C-suite level executive, and you're in the minutia of the day-to-day, doing the tactical execution, then there's nobody there up there in strategy where you need to be. So the biggest hurdle, the biggest practical pressure comes from that underlying source, is the temptation to, oh, my team members aren't doing it. They aren't doing it very well. I need to do it myself because nobody can do it better than me. Or nobody's going to pay as much attention to me. Or nobody has as much experience as I do. So this is temptation to handle their work, to come down, swoop down into the tactical. And that becomes day-to-day operations instead of working alongside the team members and helping them to develop their skills, helping them to develop their potential and their capabilities. So that's the first source of practical pressure. Practical pressure. The second source of practical pressure is struggling with burnout, struggling with it, all while trying to maintain a strong leadership presence. This whole video was all around the taboo subject of pressures. Can you see how burnout, feeling burnout, experiencing burnout, really is the pressure of needing to maintain a strong leadership presence? Right? I need to be the strong person on my team. I need to appear put together. I need to appear like I got it all together. Because if I don't, how will they perceive me as a leader? How will they respect me for my decisions if I appear frantic? Or if I appear like I don't have things under control? So there's a struggle with burnout, and it's a silent struggle. It's suffering in silence, all while trying to maintain that strong leadership presence. So these are the two practical pressures in the day-to-day that I see. All the way up to C-level executives, I've seen this in my executive coaching, in my years of being an executive coach. So those are the 10 pressures, the two areas, people pressures and personal pressures, the two areas of pressure, and the 10 individual pressures that fall under each of those. So with that, let's talk about, well, what's the relief? How many of you have been waiting for me to get to this? How many of you have been noticing that of the 10 pressures that I've been talking about, like you're nodding your head, yeah, that one, I resonate with that. Or maybe you're noticing that in your colleagues. Maybe you're noticing that dynamic with your manager. So let's talk about, well, what is a way to relieve that pressure? So when we talk about pressure relief, picture a pressure valve. Remember, P equals F over A. It's force applied over a distance. And I talked about what F and what A means in your life. So like a pressure release valve, we can relieve the pressure we experience in 3 ways. Number 1, we expand our area of support. When you increase A, you decrease P, because P and A, pressure and area, are inversely proportional. So how do you expand your area of support? Now, I've seen this in the marketplace. So many of my clients, especially the executives, as you go higher and higher up in leadership, there's a lot of performance pressure and personal pressure to appear a certain way, because executive presence is so important. But what I've seen in my clients, the ones that are the most successful after having worked with me, is their ability to invest in that level of support. And then after investing in that support, they are coachable. They're open to the wisdom of the support they reached out to. They're open to the wisdom, and they are coachable in it. Because I have seen that these same clients have been assigned mentors in the company. You know how you can reach out for mentors within the company, and it becomes like a buddy system. And I've seen executive coaches that are part of the internal company team. Now, and I've heard a lot of my clients who've received that level of internal support in the company. But the struggle with that they have in common, the common struggle with that is that when they're in the company, there's a lot of fears and hesitation of sharing their pressures, sharing where they need support, sharing how they have exhibited weaknesses in managing themselves. There's a lot of hesitation and fears that develop around that level of open conversation because it's very vulnerable. To get real support, there's a level of exposure we sometimes feel very uncomfortable in. But remember what I said at the start of this video. Be prepared to be uncomfortable now so that you can be comfortable later. So that's the first pressure release valve we have, is to expand your area of support. Who has the ability to support you through your pressures? Who has the ability to really understand and articulate the pressures that you're facing that you could not articulate yourself? Who has been able to support other people with similar pressures, just like you? And who is able to provide a structure to give you that support? So that's one pressure release valve. Expand your area of support. The second pressure release valve, remember, pressure is force over a certain area. So you guessed it. The second pressure release valve is to reduce incoming force. Remember, Newton's third law is action-reaction. Forces oppose each other. When there's a life force, you apply an equal force in the opposite direction. So reduce the incoming forces. Forces on you, such as responsibility, such as your resourcefulness, such as demands on your time, demands on deadlines, reduce those incoming forces. And you might be asking yourself, how do I do that? Now, that's not the focus of today's video in terms of how do you reduce those incoming forces. But I will say that it's all about how you lead first yourself and how you lead others. And it is possible to lead upwards. It's possible to lead upwards and to do it in such a way that it creates collaboration. It creates a meaningful relationship with fair exchange. So that's the second way to pressure relief, is reduce incoming forces. Now, the third pressure release valve, there are 3 valves. Picture that, 3 valves. The third valve to release your pressure is to distribute the load across time and resources. Time and resources. Remembering that time is your most valuable asset. That whole saying that you hear out in the marketplace where they go, time is money. How many of you heard that before? Time is money. Time is money. I submit to you that time is not money. If you believe that time is money, what you're really believing is that time equals money. And I can prove to you that time does not equal money. If I ask you, if you were at the end of your life and you knew you only had a couple days left to live, if I asked you, would you like some more money? Or would you like some more time? What would you say? Time and money are not equal. You can always make back the money. Even if you've lost it, even if you made a bad investment, you can always make that back. But you can't make back the time that you've lost. And you definitely cannot make that back the time that you've wasted. Sometimes we waste our own time. Right? But wasting time is going to be under the belief that time is money, or under the belief that money is more important than time. If you believe money is more important than the time, then you're more likely to waste the time. But I see most people wasting time and not money, and they're trying to hold on to their money. They're trying not to spend their money because they want to keep their money, but they don't realize that they're losing all their time. They don't realize that they're wasting all their time in that mindset. So it's not about time management. How do you manage your time? A minute for me is going to be a minute for you. 24 hours for me is a 24 hours for you. So it's not about time management. It's about understanding where your time is going and optimizing how you spend it. You can't manage it. So distribute the load across time and resources. As you make a bigger impact, as you're making a greater contribution, there are less and less resources, because the resources you began with are the resources you're going to finish with. And that's why it's not about how much resources you have. Sometimes we look to the other person and we say to ourselves, gee, they're so lucky. They have all these resources. But we're just looking at them and seeing them at their finish line. I submit to you that chances are you're looking at the successful person. It may seem like they have all the resources, but in fact, they were just resourceful when they began in the same place you did. Resourcefulness trumps resources. Because amount of resources given to you are outside of your control. And as long as you focus on things that are outside of your control or beyond your control, that's a recipe for anxiety. That's a recipe for depression. That's a recipe for feeling stuck and hopeless and your back's against the wall. But resourcefulness is absolutely 100% something you can control. So those are the 3 pressure release valves. So I'm going to summarize what I talked about, and then I got to let you go, because otherwise we're going to be here all day, and I want to be respectful of your time. So pressure is something that has been a taboo subject. And even though nobody's talking about, everyone's feeling it. And your pressure is the physical and mental tension you experience because you are pursuing a goal that matters deeply to you. So there's nothing wrong with pressure. The only reason why it feels like there's something wrong with pressure and you have to get rid of it is because there are those 2 big areas of pressure, the people pressures and the personal pressures. And there isn't a framework that people teach you on how to navigate those pressure and those pressure reliefs. And so pressure can increase. And when we go from being present to full overwhelm, like the chart I showed you earlier, that's why in that progression of increasing pressure, that's why it feels like pressure is bad. I got to get rid of it. I got to stop it. But you know what? If your goal is to stop the pressures and to be forever rid of your pressures, that's an impossible goal. Right. So with that, reflect upon the 2 big areas of pressures and the 10 individual pressures. So with that, have a blessed rest of your week forward. I am honored to be speaking with you today. Have a great week, and we'll see you again next week.